Can you give the order of the 5 siblings?
Yes, Hannah, Bob, Dick's father, Joe, Bill's father, and then the twins, Carrie and Evie,
Right.
who came along later.
So their parents, the Colonel and Grandma Kate, were both already dead. The Colonel
Yes.
died in 1932 or something
Yes,
like that.
right.
You came to town in
1952.
1952.
But she died that May. I came in January and she died in May.
So you never met these 2 people, but you certainly heard a lot about them.
I would hear that Dick always used to say they had, on Sundays, they'd always gather at the big house, which they called the grandparents' house. And they would have family worship, because he said they'd all sit there and, have their cocktails after church and all interrupt each other. Everybody was talking at once. They just come in a decibel louder if they wanted to say something and the other person wasn't quiet. But that's what I remember his talking about.
So there was kind of an unruly table when those 5 were kids at home?
Well, this was in the sitting room. This was in the sitting room.
Or in the sitting room.
No, it wasn't necessarily unruly. It was just, I suppose you'd call it rude today. But they just, he said as a little kid he can remember, that going on every Sunday.
Okay.
And I don't know, Barbara would probably remember more, although I said that Dick always told me that if whoever the maid was, and I can't remember, always had a jack stove going in the basement for soup, making pots of soup. And, she just keep adding to it and adding to it. Now, Barbara says she doesn't remember that, so whether it's fact or fiction, I don't know.
Wasn't there a story about the Sunday drives with the Colonel?
That I don't remember.
Okay.
That I don't know, because I never knew either.
There was something about lining the kids up to see if they'd all had their BM.
Oh, yes,
before.
right. And Hannah always said that's why they all had hemorrhoids, just because they had to go or they couldn't leave, and all the other kids would be mad at whoever hadn't gone yet because they couldn't leave on the trip,
So was the Colonel, do you have the sense that the Colonel was a fun dad?
I have no idea. I think of him as, stiffer, and Hannah quoted him constantly. He said, my father said this and my father said that. And I wish I could remember a lot of the things because they were lessons that she learned in life. And one story I do remember about Gramma Kate is they had a widow's walk around the top of their house, and she was sitting in her sewing room sewing, and the neighbor across the street called and said, Kate, do you realize your children are up there walking around the widow's walk? And she said, Grandma Kate just said, well, there's nothing I can do about it until they come down. So that took care of that one. But, no, I think, well, I don't know. I think they were good parents, but I think of him more with business, but I don't know. Maybe that's just the impression I got. I don't remember a cozy daddy kind of thing.
What are your memories of him in business?
Well, that he was a very good businessman, and he with General Trexler started Lehigh, Portland. And then M.S. Young had been going, but he took that over, and then I'm not sure whether he got into the Lehigh Valley Trust or started that or not. But by the time Dick's father, Bob, who was the second child of the Colonel, came along, he went into that.
Memories of Bob, your father-in-law.
Well, as I said, he wasn't the type that would say, may I please hold your baby, and so forth. One time when Janet was, taking her first steps, actually, she took him to him on our back porch, and she walked over to him, and everybody was, oohing and eyeing, and his face he said, come here, honey. And after he said that, his face got beet red. He was so embarrassed at having called a little kid honey. I mean, he just wasn't that type that would do that. It was inside of him, but it didn't come out normally. But I think you kids had a good memory of him, didn't you?
I don't remember at all. Which is funny because I do remember Pauline, and who's the maid, and she used to always like, grab us after dinner and play with us. But they died within, a few months of each other.
Yeah. That was a tale unto itself also. But, no, I think he He enjoyed having a good time, and I can't say too much.
He loved horses, right?
He loved horses. He and Ellie rode horses and played golf till they were in their 60s. And they would ride from 15th Street in Hamilton out to our property out where we lived. The city was bare enough then. It was enough bare
Yeah. Yeah.
area. And also Hannah used to have fox hunts out at the farm. They had a lot, and they entertained an awful lot of very important people, governors and people. And actually her second marriage was to Jay Cook, and he and his wife had come up to Skew to fox hunt. But there's some pictures of that. And she loved to entertain, and she always had Thanksgiving from the time I came into the family. And I don't know how she did it, because she'd start, early. If she'd given me everything in July to set the table for Thanksgiving, I probably wouldn't have been ready. She had 8 cherry drop leaf tables, and she'd put them end to end, and that would hold 32 people. And so that was all the adults. Then down the middle, she had these little racks made that had, she put pumpkins and apples and, dried flowers and everything, candles all the way down the table. And then she'd have a table for, say, the college-age kids over to the side, and then one for the high school-age kids, and then one for grammar school, and then one where they had to be fed, that had to have a babysitter to feed them. And one year she even had one of the Emlins in a basket in the bathtub. It was just born. And so these Thanksgiving dinners were unbelievable, I think, for everybody. And then as people started dying, you had to wait. You couldn't graduate to the big table till somebody died. And it was very hard when they got to the twins, because she had to get down to find out who was born first of the twins, so that that person could move before the other one. But I don't know how much you kids remember of that, but it really was wonderful. And she'd have prizes for everybody, for games and all kinds of games, which used to drive everybody nuts. But I think in retrospect, they love them. I had saved, she had this one year, she had 2 big cardboards with everything that had been in the news in the past 2 weeks out of magazines and newspapers, and with numbers, and whoever could identify the most, would win a prize. So I thought that was wonderful, because I won that year. Chuck Garrettson and I were the 2 winners. So anyway, being a saver, I kept them, I took them. After that, she only used it once. And I had them under my dining room rug for years, and I forgot they were there, many years. And I got them out one year, and I thought, now that we were having Thanksgiving at the club, and I thought, oh, everybody will get such a kick out of seeing these 2 boards and trying to guess again. Nobody had any interest at all, except Lance Taylor and his then wife. But nobody paid a bit of attention, so they're gone. But you'd have the little kids, the little tiny kids, have to go around and get everybody's autograph on a bingo thing, so that they'd have to speak to everybody. She had all these things arranged. Then she had all kinds of games for these various age groups of kids, and prizes. And it was just an unbelievable undertaking. There were usually about 60. She'd have 4 turkeys, and Dick and Nolan Benner and Bob and George Quay would carve. They would each carve. And it was all served, which Dora, her one maid who was tiny, would have these giant silver trays and come around trying to get in between people, to serve things. But it was amazing. Of course, naturally, it was cold. The first guy's stuff was cold by the time the last guy got it. But, and she dried her own corn. Always they grew the corn, husked it, de-haired it, cut it off, dried it, all themselves for the dried corn for Thanksgiving. And she had a flag up, and she'd always have everybody go out and salute the flag. And whatever child could play an instrument played it, whether they could play well or not. And I remember, Peter, you played the trumpet one year. Do you remember that?
Sure.
And they all played, but it was nice. And we have a couple pictures. I don't know where my picture of that is. But it was a picture of all the kids saluting the flag and then playing America or whatever they played. But that was fun. And then after dinner, they'd all play touch football out in the front yard. So it was really a wonderful day. It really was. And people used to gripe because they had to come at 2 o'clock and it was just going to ruin the day. But it was, such a wonderful day, really. It was just terrific because we were all through by 6 o'clock. It's all over. But, and she always incorporated, when somebody would get married, she'd incorporate their parents. She did the Benners and she did my family. And I guess your mother's family wasn't here. Marnie and Joe were obviously there. But it was really, really nice.
Can you describe some of the people who did all the work at Skew Farm?
Yes. She had, let's see, I'm trying to think, before Ned died, she had Dora Helbig, who was from Germany, and she made it very clear that she was High German, that she wasn't Pennsylvania Dutch. And every now and then she'd get mad at Hannah and she'd say, I quit. And Hannah would go away on a trip or something. Dora would come back out and she'd be running the place because she said, well, nobody can run it like I can. So anyway, that was a love-hate relationship for many, many years. Then she had Herb, who was the main caretaker. And he came to Dick and me when he was 84, I think it was, practically in tears. And he said, I'm going to retire. He said, I've worked for however many years it was for Hannah. He started when he was young. And he said, I just can't work any longer. So he quit. And there was Leo and Wilma Cressley, who, Leo mostly did kind of gopher work of what she told him to do. And she would go around with each one of these men outside and tell them exactly where to plant each flower. She would go through the woods and throw out, she'd have a basket full of daffodil bulbs, and she'd throw them out into the ground and then have her go along behind her and plant them. And one time she sent Leo down when we were living in our house to plant ivy around the barn, and he went right across the door and so forth, and she said, I didn't tell you to plant it across the door. And he said, but you said plant it around the barn. She said, I thought you said plant it around the barn. She said, I don't pay you to think. I pay you to do what I ask you to. And then Wilma was an inside maid. She made the beds and did that stuff. And then when we were married, I wanted a washer and dryer. And she said, well, you're crazy, then you'll have to do the laundry. And of course, I thought it was very exciting to get a washer and dryer, but because she sent her stuff out or they did it by hand. But she really was something else. It's hard to describe her. And she had a lot of influential friends in Washington and all around the state here. And I don't remember the story of Lady Oaks. This all happened down in Nassau in the Bahamas. Sir Harry Oaks was murdered. It's a big story. It was written up in Saturday Evening Post and a lot of things. It was well known at the time. But they came up to visit. And then he was murdered. I've forgotten now who they even thought murdered him. But she still came.
They came to Skew.
To visit. Yeah, a lot of important people came there to visit the governors and lieutenant governors and, state politicos that were big. But
and why was that?
Well, because she was very active in politics and she invited them. She loved to have parties. And she did it beautifully. She'd even mix up, at the time when you're first married, you have your own set of china and your own silver and you have everything match. Well, she'd have everything, bits and pieces, all kinds of odd sets. And it was charming. It was just charming that she would have one pattern here and one pattern next to it. And she entertained beautifully. Until she found out that her cholesterol was a smidgen too high. She never ate bacon or ham again, and she'd have a dinner party and say she'd be having ham. She'd have a piece of chicken for herself because her cholesterol had been a couple points above what it's perfect. So that was funny. She adhered to that the rest of her life, I think. But then, after Wilma and Leo, who else was it there then? After Ned died, a few years later, she married Jay Cook from Philadelphia, and his maids came up and worked for her, and they were two Irish people, Rose and Catherine. both from Ireland, and Catherine had worked for the Campbell Soup people, the Dorances. Rose had cooked for them, and she was a wonderful cook. And then Catherine served and, did the other things around the house. But, she had very, very good health. And it was very exciting when she was dating Jay. It was Audrey McLean and her husband were getting married about the same time, and Hannah and Jay's romance was almost more exciting. They just, just the way they acted, they were very cute. And they had a wedding at Skew Farm, a great big wedding. Just family, but the family was big by that time. And cake, a big cake, I can see Carrie cutting it. But it was very nice. It was a beautiful sunny day in July, I believe it was.
And that he didn't, I don't remember him.
Jay?
He didn't, that marriage couldn't have lasted that long before he died.
No, it wasn't. I think it was 7 years.
7 years.
And he was quite a hero in his own right. He had been gassed in the First World War, so he had breathing problems. And then he rejoined the war, which he wouldn't have had to in the Second World War, and he lost an eye. And he'd come up there to go hunting. We'd have these shoots on Saturdays. They would release birds, which I think a lot of people frown on, but they did. They'd rock them and then put them out in the field and run around behind them and shoot them. Well, they'd had a chance to wake up and fly. But he would go out and he'd have to wear oxygen when he went out, and he only had one eye, as I say. But he was quite a man. That's another whole story in itself. His family had helped financing the Civil War, and had a lot. He was an only child of the first Jay Cook, I guess, or the second. But anyway, he was a great guy and very nice. And they were very, very happy. And they lived part of the time down at Bluebell and then would come up to Skew for weekends. But they got a Christmas card one year addressed to Mr. and Mrs. J. Cook Durham. And with that, he didn't want to be part of Skew anymore if he wasn't going to be himself. He was a very independent man. And at the time they were married, it was really exciting because it was just before a big Republican convention, and I can't tell you what Jay was running for, but something big. And they went out to California for the convention on their honeymoon. And, they were a perfect match because they were both so interested in politics and the horses, although neither one of them were riding at that point. And Jay's first wife had died. And he had 2 daughters who had a fit when he married Hannah, but afraid she was going to take their mother's place, but, she bent over backwards not to, and I think they all ended up adoring her, and because she was a wonderful stepmother. Well, the other thing is that we were very close with the Bill Youngs, and we each had 2 boys that were, David's 9 months younger than Mark, and you're 11 months younger than David, and then Marty and Ted, and then Janet, but I think you all jumped in there with an extra one. I think Marty was born before Ted. But anyway, we did an awful lot together and had a lot of fun. And you all would come out for the weekend or to spend the night, and you'd think you were going to Florida or someplace because you'd bring your own porta-crib, your own baby butler, all your own equipment. And I remember one night your father drove back into Allentown, which is like 10 miles, to get your cereal because we didn't have your favorite cereal at our house. You or Mark, I don't know which one. But, it was fun. We had a lot of fun times. This one time with Mark, we thought he was going to die. We had a little puddle, a little swimming pool out in the backyard, and the boys had been out there nude. They were, like 1 and 2. And you spent the night, and I guess the fathers had gone off to work, and Mark started to cry, and he cried. When he cried, he could make an awful noise. And we didn't know what was the matter, and we were scared to death. We thought he was dying because, he was in such agony. And Aunt Hannah at that time had nurses for Ned up there. And so we called her to come down to see, and she didn't know. And so we were ready to take him to the hospital, but we were both so stuck on schedules. It was time for David to eat, so I couldn't leave to go over there to take Mark to the hospital because it was time for David to eat. But anyway, we finally found out. Anyway, he finally had a big BM, and they'd been eating popcorn while they were out in the pool, and he apparently swallowed an unpopped popcorn, which got caught in his intestines or something. We really thought he was going to die. But just stupid little funny things like that. But we had a lot of good times together and did a lot of things. And we did didn't we go to Surf City one time together?
Stone Harbor.
Stone Harbor. I think we rented a house one summer and went. But you kids have stayed close through the years. And it's been a very nice relationship.
What are your recollections of my dad coming to town and what?
Oh, well, he
what
was great,
like?
and I remember we have this picture. I guess Janet had it. Your mother was teaching school in Florida or something, and somebody had maybe Bill had a party for Dick and me when we were engaged. And there's a great picture of your dad and I dancing when I was skinny and little. And no, I always had a great time with your dad. I thought I got along very well with all of you.
And Mom?
Your mom, she was, one thing I remember, she had to have her coffee so hot that it would blow your head off. And I couldn't drink it till it was cool, so we'd get together to have a cup of coffee and, she'd be through with hers by the time mine got cool enough to drink. But she was great. She, I don't know how to say it right, but she was a little stiff on some things. Like if Marty didn't do something she wanted, if we'd be all going out to dinner, which was a real big treat for the six of us to go out, or however many there were, 8. And if Marty did something that wasn't right, then she wouldn't go. And, it made some difficult times with that kind of thing, but that's really about the only thing. There was one we used to spend all the 3 holidays with the Taylors. Memorial Day, 4th of July, and Labor Day. And that one year, do you remember that? She wouldn't go. Well, Marty had done something, and I didn't know it until we got down there. But it was just a funny thing that, sort of put a damper on things. But that was that.